Okay, so for 10.1, uh, it's about frequency distributions. And really, there's two main types of distributions they're going to work with. Really short section when it comes down to it because they're just talking about these two things that's here. And the very first item that they talk about is a grouped frequency distribution. And when they talk about a group frequency distribution, it basically is like a frequency table. Really is the same thing, but it's just in intervals on this thing. So when you'll see this part of it, most of the time it's going to be set up where that you have some defined intervals that's here. And then you're going to have the frequency that's over here. And the way those set now, the one thing that's kind of true on this one is that whenever you're doing your intervals here, the intervals have to be the same. We'll say the same rate. I don't know if that's quite the word I want to use, but that's the closest thing I can think of. I hate to say the intervals must be at the same interval because that would be double checking it out, but basically they have to be the same spread on those. That if you're going through this one, if this one is from 1.0 to 1.4, if you started with an interval there, the next interval would start at 1.5. Well, if you go from 0 to 4 here, you're adding 4 from this number to this number, you'd have to do the same thing here. You'd have to add 4 to make it 1.9. So the spread between the intervals has to be the same. This one can't be 1.0 to 1.4. This one couldn't be 1.5 to 1.8. So that's if there's any one thing when you're going through these, and this is where they'll have these intervals predefined for you, and that's the part of these problems that makes it a little bit different. Is that if not, then the intervals could be all kind of. If they don't define the intervals here, then there's a million different correct answers because people could, if you just give people a different range and say here make a frequency table, there's a million different answers that could be correct. So this is one they'll have to define the intervals for you when it comes down to this one. So you really won't have to worry about this part of it, about the intervals being at the same rate or the same distribution, because they'll have to define that for you. And depending on how you do this, what you'll see is you'll just basically see they'll have intervals here, kind of like we had for this part, and then you'll just go back and put the frequency in. If you were doing this one by hand, which sometimes people will do that, you'd have one more spot in the middle where you'd have a tally where you go back through and check them off, and then you can get the frequency that would be here. Um, so that part's you won't see this part, but if you were going to do one of these by hand, you would really want to do that so that then you could go back. If you had 4 tally marks here, you could go back and put a 4. If you had 3 tally marks here, you go back and put a 3. So it's one of those things that the way it'll be set up, because it's online, it won't quite look that way because of how it's set up and the way it's going to go through it there. Okay, so I think that was pretty straightforward. They'll give you a group of numbers and ask you just to make. They'll have the intervals preset here, and then you'll just go back and put in the frequency of everything that's here. All right, and if you look at the example that was here, there's the frequency table that they were looking at. Okay, so it says the amounts in dollars paid by students are paid by 20 students for textbooks during the fall term are given below. So here's their range of numbers, and again, they've got the intervals preset so that basically you're just going back and putting these in here. Now, probably again, what you would want to do, this is the answer you'd have in homework. You'd almost want to make a tally mark over here, so that as you go through each of these numbers, and sometimes it's easy for one like this. It's almost easier just to print this problem out. It should give you an option to print these out. But just go through and print them off and then just check them off one at a time. So 21 would be in here. 34 is in here. 29, 45, 27, 56. And then you just got to go through and check them off one at a time. 37, 61, 49, 56, 31, 27, 43, 66, and 19. All right. And again, if there was one like this where if 19 was the last number there, if that one hadn't have filled in on the chart, you'd either leave it blank or put a 0. But in that case, we've got 1, so we'll go 1 there. We've got 6, there's 3, there's 4, there's 2, and then there's 4. Okay, and again, the easy way to make sure that you've got all the numbers correct is that if you go back and add up all the frequency, so there's 7, there's 10, 14, 15, 16, add all those together, so that's got to be 20. So we did have 20 people show up on our tally marks here. So there you go. That's your grouped frequency distribution. So that's what they'll do, where you just kind of go through that one. The next thing that they'll talk about. Oh, now one thing they may ask you to do on this case too, and we did this. I don't remember now if it was the last chapter or 2 chapters ago. They may ask you to take this information that you've got here and then make a histogram. And just remember that a histogram is just a bar graph. So that would be, now that one you would still do it in a grouped interval range if they ask you to do that. So you could still do something like this where you got 10 to 19.99. That one would just go up 1. You've got the 20s. That one will go up 6. And we'll just make it short here. You've got your 30s. Oops, sorry, you can't see that. So there's where you got everything. And again, if you want to kind of go short on this one, just so we got, there's everything in the 10s, there's everything in the 20s, the 30s would go to 3. You've got your 40s up to 4. The 50s, there's only 2. And then the 60s would be back up to 4. Okay, now, and they probably won't just do it where you've got the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s. They'll probably have it listed where it's 10 to 19.99. This one would be 20 to 29.99. So they'll actually take these intervals that you have here and list them across the bottom. Okay, so pretty straightforward. You basically it's just a tally. Basically, when they talk about a group frequency distribution, it's really just a fancy tally mark. It's a way just to kind of keep up with the tallies and know what the count for what's going on there. Okay, so that's the first one they give you is the group frequency distribution. The second one that they do is a stem and leaf plot. Okay, and with the stem and leaf plot, basically here's what they talk about it. If you've never seen one of these before, basically is this: it separates the data by the first few digits, and it depends on how many digits the items has, whether it's got 2 or 3 or 4 digits. But basically, they're going to separate the first few digits, whether that's 1 or 2 or 3 digits, which they're going to call a stem. And with the stem and leaf plots, they always separate that first one or two or three digits on the left from the very last digit that's on the right. So the stem is basically everything. If you take the number, the last digit is always the leaf. Everything to the left of that is what they're going to call the stem. And with the stem and leaf plot, that's how they'll separate it. They'll always put a key at the bottom of it. And the key will show what the data represents. And the key usually will do something like this, that it'll have, after we show you this here in a minute, you have something like 5-9, and they'll tell you that 5-9 equals, 59. Or if it was a decimal number, they would tell you that it would equal 5.9. So they'll show you something like that. And if it was, a two-digit number, if it was like 15/9, same thing, then it would tell you that that's equal to 15.9. Okay, and when they're doing it's similar to the part before with the group frequency distribution. That when you're doing this part of it, the leaves have to be kind of in that same interval type thing. That the leaves must be grouped. In the same interval. So just like we're saying the one up here with the group frequency distribution, that if you went from 1.0 to 1.4, how it was 4 apart, you'd have to do the same thing to go from 1.5 to 1.9. So when you're doing the stem and leaf, it kind of follows on that same suit, that when you're going through these, that the distribution kind of needs to be the same as you're setting these up. Okay. And there's really not a good way without a lot of writing on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can share one from the homework, just so you can see what it looks like. And we'll use that for an example. Kind of get us there. Okay, so let me do this. Let me change my settings here. If it will let me. And here we go. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see that part of it. That we've got, here's where they take to construct a stem and leaf plot for the data. And here's one where, again, I had to show you this one because this is one of those problems that, again, if I showed you one, it could be, this is another one where you can do a stem and leaf plot, and the answer could be a million different ways. So for this one, if you notice over here, you got the leaf is from 0 to 1 when they're doing the range on this one. So this would be one where you'd go back, and they're kind of telling you that they have to kind of define this one, because if they don't, this makes this question pretty much impossible. So this is 0, 1. The next range right here would be a 2, 3. This one would be a 4, 5. This would be 6, 7. This one would be an 8, 9. And then you go to the next one, and the 6 is this same thing. This would be a 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9. For these two problems, they don't even put, they just start at 4, 5. So this would be one where you would start at 4, 5, the next one would be 6, 7, the next one would be 8, 9, and then the next one would be 0, 1. So it's just going to kind of go through there. And at the bottom, you can see that you've got 6/5 equals 65 inches. If you notice the key over here, they've already kind of given you a trick question on this one because it says 6/5. These all say inches, but that one's got a money symbol. So this is the amount spent in dollars. I don't know why they put the inches on there. It's the amount in dollars spent in each restaurant. So this one's got the dollars here. I think that's just a typo on their part on that problem. It shouldn't say inches at the bottom of it. I don't know why. But anyway, okay, so this is one where you almost have to go back through. And now when you do these, this is where you'd have to kind of list these problems off. So the very first thing is we need to see if there's any 50s that start with the 0 or 1 to know if we're here or if we're here. If you go through your list of numbers, 55, 64, 60. Okay, so there's nothing here that's in the 50s and 51s. So it won't be that one. Our lowest number right here is 55. So that's going to have to put us here in option B. Okay, because there's only that 155 number. Everything else in the 50s is blank. And the way you do this one is that with the stem and leaf plots, you put each individual leaf. So if there's a 55, you go back and put a 5 here for the 55. Okay. There's nothing else there. And again, this is one where you might almost have to print this one off just to make sure everything will, that you can keep up with everything. So this is basically everything that's 54 and 55. You have to put each individual one that shows up in here. So this would be 60 and 61. So for this one over here, we've got 61 and 61. So when you go back for this one, you're going to have to put a 1 and then put another 1. If you go through the list here, there's a 0, so we need to put a 0 in front of that. So you've got to put a mark for each and every time that a 60 or a 61 shows up, and you put what that last number is going to be. And there's one more 1 there. Okay, so that's the big difference between the stem and the leaf. With the group frequency table, it's just a tally mark. This one, you actually put each individual score into the leaf so that you can keep up. So this one, you see every single score, but it's just kind of grouped together for those. For all the 62s and 63s, there's a 2 and a 3 and a 3. So 2, 3, 3 on the bottom. There's another 3 up here. Here's another 3. And that's it. Okay, so this will be 64s and 65s. If we go to the top, there's a 64, 64, 64, 64, 64, 64. Next ones would be 6s and 7s. And 66. And there's another 66. I didn't see any 67s. This would be 68 and 69. Nothing there. There's a 69. There's a 68. I'm going to put an 8-second just to see what it will do here. And we're going to check it. Okay, so it said it was incorrect, so we need to go back and put an 8 in front. So they are going to make you go specific on the order on that one. Just want to see what would happen there. All right, let's check it again. There we go. So they have to be in order. I just want to double check and see, because sometimes they'll let you do that and sometimes they don't. But in this case, the numbers have to be in order when you go through the parts on this one. Okay, so, and that's the big thing on this one, is that if they don't give you these ranges off to the side with the stem and leaf, like the 0, 1 here and the 4, 5 here, this is one of those problems where there could be, if there's 15 people in class, there might be 15 different ways that people would group this one. So that they have to kind of give you some kind of way to go on this one. If not, the correct answers could could be enormous of how many different answers could be correct on this thing. Okay. And back it up here for a second. Here's another one. Here's one similar to what we did a minute ago. There's an interval and a frequency table. Here's another one where they give you an interval frequency table to go back and kind of fill in the numbers on these. And again, some of them are bigger. This one's got 30 different students. So some of the problems they give to you, they will be kind of a little bit longer when they set up these. There's one more where, again, they give you, now notice on the range on this one when they're doing the leaves, this one goes from 0 to 4. So the numbers have to be spaced out 4 apart. So if this is 0 to 4, the next group of numbers would be from 5 through 9. And they've already got that one over here. So this would be from 5 through 9 for that part. So they have to kind of give you this range over here for the leaves to know exactly what it is that you're talking about when you get to those problems. Okay. And then the last thing that they give to you in section 1 is the shape of the distributions. And when they're talking about the shape of the distributions for these, this one is all about the histograms, bar graphs. And this is where they're going to talk about just basically if you lay these things out here, how they look. There's basically 4 different types that they're going to key on. You have what they call uniform, where the data is all kind of the same. So this would be one where if you had a problem like this, you'd have a bar graph and everything would be kind of, maybe not exactly the same, but relatively flat all the way across. You may have a little ups and a little downs, but for the most part, you could just about draw a straight line across it, and everything's going to be pretty close to that straight line. Okay, second one they're going to work on is what they call a normal distribution. And this is when the data is bell shaped. This is that where you got your average students and you've got your A's should be about the same as your F's, and your your B's should be about the same as your D's. That when you get finished with the graph on this one, that it looks something like this. If you got finished, you'd have, and again, this is just what they call a normal distribution. And whatever range of numbers you were doing, you'd have something that would be kind of low that would be here. You'd have another group that would be something like this. Then you've got a big group that's in the middle. You got another group that's here, and then you got a smaller group that's there. So I think y'all probably heard this from teachers that you should have an even distribution. You should have a lot of people getting C's. Few people are getting D's and B's, and then you got a small amount of people getting A's and F's. That's that normal bell-shaped curve distribution thing that they talked about. Okay, and then the other two that they'll mention are left skewed and right skewed. And the biggest thing when they talk about the skew on this one is that whether it's a left skew or a right skew, when they talk about these, this is going to refer to the tail. This is when they talk about the skew data, it's not where the big hump is, because basically on this one, you're going to have one big hump, and then it's going to have this is one of those tests where either you made it really hard and like nobody passed it, or you made it really easy and everybody passed it. So this is that skewed data that they're going to talk about when they go through these parts of it. And again, the skewed part of it refers to the tail. So if you had a test, best thing to do is just to kind of put it down here. So when they talk about left skewed data, this is where you've got a big long tail here at the end, and then you got a bunch of people over on the right hand side. This would be where you made the test too easy. That you got a lot of people that basically everybody passed the test, and there was just maybe one A or one F and one B and one C and one D, and then you had all these people in here that got A's. So when they talk about the skew data, they're talking about how long the tail is. If there's wherever the big tail is, that's where they're going to talk about the skewed part of it. Or if you talk about a right skewed test, it's going to be the opposite. This would be the test where you made it too hard. That you've got a lot of people that failed this test, but then there was only just a handful of people that wound up, passing this class. Okay, and this part will be really easy because they'll give you some graphs and they'll say, find the one that's right skewed or find the one that's left skewed, and you just go back through and pick out the problem that's here. Or they give you a graph and they'll give you options. Say, okay, is this a uniform distribution? Is it normal? Is it left skewed or it's right skewed? So this one is all really, really easy just to pick out. You don't have to do anything number wise with these. This is all multiple choice where they give you an option and you just pick which one it is that it's going to be. Okay, and that's it for 10.1. So 10.1 is all graphs. You don't really do, there's really not a lot of math in this one because of just the way it is that you're setting up the numbers and going through and graphing these. So you don't actually have to do a lot of math with the parts of what's with these. Now with 10.2, they kind of pick back up on 10.2. And this is one where you actually have to wind up doing a lot of math that's in here. 10.2 is what they call measures of center. Okay, and the very first couple of things that they look at, we'll go ahead and get this one out of the way. The very first thing that you're going to see when you go through some of this is the sigma notation. And if you don't know what that is, that's just another way for them to say that this is the sum of some numbers. And one of the things that they will do is that if you see sigma xi, that's basically the sum of all numbers. And for a lot of what you're going to see on these, that n is going to equal your number of terms. And one of the big, really three things that they're going to look at for this part of it is talking about the mean. Again, the mean is just the average. So the mean is the sum of all the numbers that you have, or the sigma xi, divided by how many numbers that you have. Okay, and they will just say, okay, here's some different numbers that you have, and just give you some examples here just to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So for example 1, let's give you some numbers. Let's say that you have 14.5, 16.5, 27.5, 12.5, 27.5, 17.5, and 13.5. And I'll tell you to find the mean. Okay, and it's pretty straightforward. Just take the different numbers that you have and just go back and add up all the numbers. So just add all those numbers together. And I forgot my calculator, so give me 1 second. Okay, so finding the sum of those. Comes out to be 129.5. We have 7 different numbers. So then taking that and dividing it by 7, come out that that's going to be 18.5. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, the one thing that they will do that will be a little bit different, where they'll ask you to find the mean, just to show you a different kind of question, is that also they will give it to you in a not quite a stem and leaf, not quite a it's not quite a group frequency distribution table. It's more like an individual frequency table. So it's kind of a little spin off of some of the problems that would have been from section 1, but not quite. It's a little different on this one. This one, they've got the individual. This one's going to be set where you have individual values, and then you've got the frequency table here. So it's a frequency table, but it's not a grouped frequency table. It's just an individual item frequency table, I guess is the best way of saying that. Okay, so basically it's saying you have 3 5s, you've got 2 11s, you've got 2 12s, and you've got 5 14s. Easy thing on this one is that to get the sum and everything that's here, all you have to do is just multiply all these together. So take the value, multiply by the frequency, so that would be 15, 22, 24, that would be 70, and then add all those together. Now, again, you could go back and add, a 5 and a 5 and a 5 and 11 and 11 and 12 and 12. You could list all these individually. But the quickest way is just to go back and multiply these out, because you've got 3 5s, you've got 2 11s, and 2 12s. Put all that together. Comes out to be 131. And since this is your frequency that's here, if you just add all this together, so that's what, 5, 10, there's 12 total. So then we know we got to take the 131 and divide it by the 12. And they should tell you then to round this thing off to 1 decimal place or 2 decimal places, whatever that may be. If we go to 2 decimal places, this would round off to about 10.92. Okay, so 131 is your sum. This is your n. Can I get the numbers there? Okay, and that's the only thing I could find that was the least little bit of something different, where that they give this to you in a frequency table. And again, it's really easier here because then you don't have to add up each individual score, because you've got them in groups that you've got it kind of tally marks here. So this one actually should go faster than if you've got all the individual ones like we had that was up here. Okay, so there's the mean. It's just finding the average. Pretty straightforward on that one. Not really anything too weird that they can do for those kind of questions. All right, after the mean, the next thing that they go to is the median. And the median is just the middle number. But the key thing is that you have to put the items in some type of order. And it doesn't matter whether you do least to greatest or greatest to least, as long as they're in order, it does not matter when you go to these. Now, and again, the one catch is that sometimes, if there's, let's say one like this. Okay, so here's the problem where they would give you to say find the median. They'll give you the numbers to start off with, and they're all in some just random order. So that you have something like this. So very first thing you have to do is go back and put them in order from least to greatest, or greatest to least. Doesn't matter. I always usually do least to greatest. So start with the lowest number, which is 10. Next number up is 11. Next number up is 12. 14 is next. 15 is next. And then 25 and 25. And yes, if you have repeats, like with the 25, you have to list every individual single number when it goes to this. And this is where you can go back and find, you can kind of, and everybody does it different. Some people, start at the end, they cover up the first number on the left and the last number on the right, and they just keep working back in until they get to the middle. Some people just count. But this one, 14 would be your median. So that you've got an equal number on the left and on the right when you spread this thing out. All right, and if you remember, sometimes when you do this, if you had 6 numbers, when you had this, there would not be a median because you've got 3 over here, you've got 3 over here, that basically this would be in the middle. So the second option is if there is no middle number, so if this 10 was gone, if we got to here, we'd have 3 to the left, we have 3 to the right. Basically, it would be somewhere in between the 14 and the 15. That if there is no middle number of where this thing should be, then this is where you're just going to find the sum of the two numbers, or you're going to add the two numbers together. So basically now instead of having one number in the middle, you've got 2 numbers in the middle. You're going to add the 2 numbers in the middle together. And then you're going to divide by 2. Basically, you're just going to find the average of the 2 middle numbers that's there. Okay, so let's give you one of those. So we got 41, 58, 54, 33, 38, and 45. Okay, and same thing. You've got to get it from least to greatest. So starting with the smallest number, or again, you can do greatest to least, but as long as they're in order. Next up is 38. Then we have 41. Then we have 45. And then 54 and 58. Okay, so for this one, you've got, counting it back, you get to the end. There is not a middle number, so you've got 41 and 45 in the middle. So technically the middle would be there. So that's where we're going to add these two together. So we've got 41 plus 45, that's what, 86, and then divide it by 2. So then your median would come out to be 43. Okay, and then the last measures of central tendency that they talk about is the mode. And the mode is just the number. Or again, it could be numbers because it may be that there may be more than one number that shows up that occurs the most often. Okay, so this is one of those that now where you get the numbers if there is a tie. I'll just say it this way: if there are multiple numbers that occur the most, then you have to list each item or each data item, whatever how you want to say that there. Okay, and on the flip side, if there are no numbers that repeat, then there is no mode. Okay, and don't put 0 for that one because no mode means there's nothing that occurs. If every number just shows up once, don't put 0 because then if you put 0, then you're saying 0 occurs the most time. So that's one of those, if there's nothing that repeats, if none of the numbers repeat, every number is listed individually and none of them repeat, then you have to put the words actually no mode on that one because that's saying that, okay, nothing repeated. So there's nothing that stands out about this one that says it's something that occurs the most. Okay, so let's show you a couple of examples here for that one. Okay, we'll just run through a couple examples, and both of these we're going to find the mode here. Okay, and probably a lot of these problems they may ask you to do multiple things. It may be that they may ask you to find the median and the mode, or they might ask you to find the mean and the mode, or they might ask you to find the mean and the median. So it may be one of those where that a lot of times when you're going through these, they may ask you to find multiple different parts of each one of these as you go through this one. But for this one, the only number that repeats is 9. So that's it. We'll just go back and put a 9. Okay, and then they'll give you another one where, again, you have probably more numbers to go back and kind of pick through, and you've got to kind of look for the repeats here. and again, this is where if they ask you to do, if we went back to section 10.1, this would be where doing a stem and leaf plot would be nice, because if they ask you to do a stem and leaf plot on this one, it would be easy to find the mode, because then you'd have the one that would just repeat the most times. But to me, they should have put that back in section 1 for this part, because that would make it really easy to find the mode, but they don't. So for this one, just finding numbers repeat. If you go through this list, 79 does not show up more than once. 81 doesn't, because there's only other one is 87. So the 80s, all the 80s are out. We've got 67. Nope. 69. No, there's a 72. Okay, so 72 shows up twice. And I think the only other thing that shows up twice then would be the 71. Um, 68, 78, yeah, that would be it. So for that one, that would be 2 answers that you have. So there's 2 modes, 72 and 71. Okay, now if we want to do kind of a what if here, if we had taken out these 72s and 71s that's here, if you had one like this where that there's nothing in here that would show up twice, everything just occurs one time, that's where you would say that there would be no mode. So if we took out these 2 numbers here that took out the repeats of the 72 and 71, if this was our list of numbers that we had, then that would be a problem, that you would just say that there would be no mode there. Okay. So for mean, median, and mode, that's pretty much all that they can do for you there. And then the last thing that they give to you in section 2. This one is a grouped distribution mean. Looks a lot like the very first graph, the group distribution frequency, or group frequency distribution that we did in the first one. So this is one that they will set it up like this. They'll give you an interval, and they give you a frequency. Okay, so this will look exactly like what we did in the very first part of section 1 earlier. They'll give you an interval from 0 through 9. They'll tell you this one had a frequency of 1. They give you maybe 10 through 19. This one had 2. 20 through 29 was 7. 30 through 39 was 6. 40 through 41 was 0. And then 50 through 59 was 1. Okay. All right, so you're going to do basically about 4 different things. So we're going to kind of flip back and forth on this one so you can see what it is we're going to do, because we're going to show a lot of the work that's here, but I'll list off what it is that you have to do for these. So I'll kind of flip-flop back and forth here. Okay, so the very first thing is you've got this interval that's here. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find the midpoint of each interval. Okay, so probably what I'll do is just below that, just to the side of this one, I'll kind of show you what it is here. So you got from 0 to 9, basically you're just going to add these 2 things together. You're going to do 0 plus 9, add that together, and then divide it by 2. So that will make it 4.5. Okay, do the same thing here. We're going to do 10 plus 19, which would be 29. We would divide that by 2. That's going to come out to be 14.5. And after you've done one or two of these, you go, well, okay, if the interval is the same here, that's always going to, for the most part, going to kind of have that same look to it. This would be 24.5. This is going to be 34.5. This is going to be 44.5. And this is going to be 54.5. Okay, and then the second thing you're going to do is you're going to multiply the frequency in the midpoint. Okay, so the frequency was 127.601. Okay, so that would be our product that we'll put over here. So we're going to multiply those two numbers together to come up with our product that we would get here. Okay, so this one is 4.5, 29, 171.5. This is 207. This is 0. If you don't want to put that, that's fine, but we'll go ahead and put 0 just for a placeholder there. And then we've got 154.5. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of pull this over. So find the midpoint of each of the intervals. So basically, you're kind of starting it almost over here. That you've got the midpoints now. Still got our frequency. So we're going to multiply those two together to get these numbers that's here. And then the third thing you're going to do is once you multiply that together is you're going to find the sum of all the products. So all these products that we've got here, you're just going to go back and make a big list down here and tell me what the sum is going to be. Okay, so if we go back and add all these together, this comes out to be 466.5. Okay, and because it's a mean, we're still going back to that thing. We're going to take the sum and divide it by the number of items. So then we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to divide the sum by the number of items, which for our case is, again, just finding the sum of the frequencies. So there's 3, there's 7, there's 10, there's 16, there's 17. So our number of items is 17, so we're going to take the 466.5 and divide it by 17. Okay, and most of these are probably going to come out, we're going to have to round these off. So if we round this off to 2 decimal places, that's going to be 27.44. Okay, so it's basically taking the group frequency distribution that we did in section 1 and using that to go back and then find the mean of that distribution that you have that's there. Okay, oh, now the other thing they may ask you to do for this one, if this is 27.44, they may ask you, okay, what interval then would have the mean? So 27.44, that would fall somewhere in the 20s, so then the interval where the mean is located would then be that 20 through 29, basically in that 20 range, the range it's in the 20s there. Okay. And again, the only thing I can really see that they would do in some of these is they'll have you do a problem where you have to do the mean and the median, or the mean and the mode, or they may ask you to find all three. That so they'll just ask you to kind of go back and forth. They may do a chart like this where they ask you to find the mode from a frequency distribution or something like that. But they'll just make you just keep going back and finding out different parts of the mean and the median and the mode, and just having working through all those numbers. Um, and again, we could do section 3 today, but I think just so that we kind of stay on track and so that we're not getting too much going at the same time, that's all that we'll do for today. The chapter 9 test is, make sure you got that finished up if you haven't already, because let's do it midnight tonight. And then we'll worry about, again, chapter 10 will come sometime a little bit later, but we'll worry about that a little bit more next week when we get there. So other than that, that is all that I have for today. So any questions that y'all have?